Hi everyone, this is Ronnie. Someone asked me to do a video on starches for some reason, and they didn't give me a lot of detail as to what they wanted me to say about it. So I'll generally talk about starches and where to start with this. So I guess I'll be talking in this video. This is for people interested in raw food and the raw vegan diet, or diet in general, I suppose. Starches. What is starch? What foods have a lot of starch? Should starch be a big part of our diet? My thoughts about all this. Is starch a big part of my diet, and so on? So I'll try and address a lot of ideas on this. Starch, what is starch? It's a name for essentially complex carbohydrates or long chains of sugars. So the human body, and I would assume many or most animals, our cells require glucose or sugars, simple sugars that are carbohydrates, hydrated carbons. And these are a part of life. Carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and also DNA and a few things. These are a common aspect of life. So things that are alive, there's usually carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids or fats involved, and that's why they're very important. They are commonplace though throughout food, um, through animals, through animal diets, and they get them in different ways. Um, but in nature, simple carbohydrates which are easily digestible, such as sugar, such as glucose, such as fructose, these are sugars, are available in the form of fruit, in vegetables, in flowers, in honey, in mother's milk, a number of different places. And those we can essentially digest almost instantly, or they almost straight away can go into our bloodstream, go to our cells, and they are a part of our cellular function. They're part of our respiration, part of the process of creating energy for the body. So if you take in sugar, people all of a sudden have energy a lot of the time. And we crave sugar, we crave sweetness, because we're looking for fuel, for energy. And we taste it. We can taste the sweetness of it. Whereas, and that's simple carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates are long chains connected up of sugars. So it would be like chains of glucose and sucrose and fructose, but all bonded together. So they have to be broken down into sugars for us to then consume. Within our mouth, we have a enzyme, amylase, which is for breaking carbohydrates down into sugars. So as you have carbohydrates in your mouth, you might find they get a little bit sweeter as it's being broken down in your mouth if you just hold it in your mouth for longer. So um, that's the difference. That's kind of chemically, well, they're a carbohydrate. Starch is a carbohydrate. But what starch is, as opposed to sugar is the way that we store um, energy in our body. So we actually store sugar in our muscles, and we store sugar in our liver in the form of glycogen. So it does get changed into glycogen um, as a sugar, whereas in plants it gets stored as starch. So in plants, they store energy as starch, and that's why in potatoes there's starch, because it is there to fuel the plant. That's what the potato is for. It is the stored energy of the plant. And Dr. McDougall calls it a storage organ. A storage organ. So the potato is the storage organ of the plant. Similar, I believe, to other grains and things like that. But other root vegetables, all the same. Same kind of idea. Grains, it's I'm assuming once again it's a stored yeah, it's a stored energy around the seed, I suppose. I suppose. Um, Once again for helping to grow another plant. So it's the stored energy, it's a way of storing energy for plants in a stable state, right? So that's what starch is. In terms of human beings, it appears to be the case that finding starch is a commonplace part of human diets around the world. And raw foodists can't really deny that too much. That starch has become pretty much a commonplace part of human diets around the world. In the Oriental world, they had rice. In the Middle East, they had various forms of grains. In Europe, they had different types of grains like oats originally, barley, rye, wheat. In the Americas, they had forms of corn and maize. So there's different starches for different parts of the world. In Africa, they still use some of the starchy bananas, plantains they use. So there's various starches around the world, but it's fairly common that starches are a commonplace part of human diets, a daily part of people's diet, and cultures have them. Bread is obviously the main one of the main things that it's turned into. And even tribes in the forests and things have forms of starch, okay, that are generally cooked or almost entirely cooked. Starch is generally cooked because starch is not something that we are particularly well adapted to digest. So, starchy fruit, unripe fruit, starchy bananas, wheat, potatoes, raw, none of these things are particularly attractive for us to eat. None of them are easy for us to particularly digest, so they have to be cooked. In nature, we would not prefer to eat these things. They are not our preference. It's only through the medium of cooking that we make these things edible. Starch tends to be tasteless as we cannot taste starch. We can taste sugar, but we cannot taste starch. So generally, starch has other things added to it as flavoring. So tends to be people add salt, add fat, add other things. Bread almost always has salt in it. Um, Grains are generally have something added to it. Even potatoes, which I would say you can eat potatoes cooked with nothing else on them and enjoy them okay, but people tend to end up adding stuff to them. So all of these things, they're not high in flavor, but people add things to them. Um, what's really the problem health wise with starch? For me personally, my problem is not to say that starch is particularly causing disease or causing problems. I think there are certainly maybe some connections with digestive problems. There might be connections with other things. The way that starches are cooked, yes, it can lead to carcinogens and things of that nature, but they're not strongly associated, as far as we know, with the big diseases. We don't have the information, the research, comparing it with a fruit diet over the years, we don't quite know. But a starch-based diet would be better than the standard diet. So is it a healthier way forward? Yes. From the standard diet, it is a step forward to go towards a starch-based diet or a low-fat, mostly starch diet. It's a way forward. Personally, I think that fruit is better. Fruit is easier to digest. Fruit is more pleasant to digest. Fruit has a better effect on my head, my mind, my emotional sense. I don't overconsume fruit. There's a number of different reasons that I prefer fruit and think it is more optimal for us. But starch is a way forward for a lot of people. I personally think an issue with the starchy foods, and I'm not sure if it's starch in general, is that they tend to be quite addictive. Now, whether that's over time we selectively bred addictive varieties because we preferred them, because addictive things are things we want to do more of, they're stimulating. Perhaps we did. Perhaps we intentionally grew them to be more and more stimulating, more and more addictive, more and more moreish. Perhaps we did that. Perhaps we chose the ones that were the most. But they tend to seem to be addictive and people can't quite stop eating them, especially compared to fruit. And personally, I think it's very hard to have a diet where you're trying to have, 50% raw, 50% starch. It's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to do a raw food diet and you're including potatoes, rice, and pasta once in a while. It's very hard to do that. Does starch make up a big part of my diet? Well, starch is in all fruits and it'll be in all vegetables to some degree. And the unriper a fruit, then the more starch. There's always going to be starch in fruits and vegetables you're eating. So we do naturally break it down, we do naturally digest it. But for me, potatoes, rice, pasta, bread, these are not part of a raw food diet, really. And it's very hard to have a raw food diet if you start to include these things back into your diet. Breaking your addiction to these things, which I do see as an addiction personally as a raw foodist, is one of the stages. Now, there's a few things on the borderline. What about sweet corn? What about eating raw sweet potato? It's not something I don't eat raw sweet potato, but sweet corn, I eat raw sweet corn or add sweet corn to salads and things. What about peas? Are they a starch? They're kind of a starch legume thing. Yeah, they're a bit more starchy. They also have sugar in them. Um, so these are kind of maybe on the borderline to some degree. What about certain legumes and things? Once again, I'm not really a big fan of trying to make legumes more edible. I don't think they're particularly edible by sprouting them and things like that. I don't think there's any major benefits to it. They're higher in protein, but I don't see that as being something that's important to me. So, starches, um, complex long bonds of sugar, they're a carbohydrate, they are a healthier option, they're commonplace in the human diet, they are, to me, addictive, and that's probably why they're a commonplace part of the diet. Um, Less good to digest, less flavoursome, addictive in quality. It's the main reason I stay away from them is I just can't stop eating them when I start. And it takes me ages to stop eating them when I start. So for me, starches aren't the way forward, but for many people, it is a stepping stone forward to eat a starch-based diet. And if you want more information about that, you can look at Dr. McDougall, the Starch Solution. You can look at that diet, and he believes we are starchitarians, that we are designed to consume starch, but we really can't digest starch raw. And does it have problems over time? Does it have more negative effects than we really know about? Potentially, we don't have a lot of scientific information on that yet, I don't think. But I think it's quite obvious that we are fruitarian, we are primates, we are frugivorous, and that the way forward is fruit. So thank you very much for listening today. If you want more information, you can come to UK Fruit Fest. If you want some information about the festival, you can message me below in the comments. info@fruitfest.co.uk is the email address. If you want to email me about anything, if you want more information, I do coaching once in a while if someone wants it. I have a coaching group on a Sunday if you want to join. A very small group at the moment. We have our Fruity Fridays, we have all sorts of stuff. Basically, any help, you can go to info@fruitfest.co.uk, send me an email to that, or put a message below, and I'll try and get back to you. Thank you very much.